All right, we're getting ready for part 2 now, and where we left off beforehand was where I basically had made a bit of a challenge to God, and I asked him that he open the doors, that he take me to each one of those 12 cities, and that he send me somebody to do this project, so to speak, with. So basically all it was just walking, praying, interceding on behalf of the cities. And so I kind of went, where everybody generally goes when they want to get in contact with people or announce things or whatnot. I went to Facebook. So I went on Facebook, and I started looking through, scrolling through, just, seeing if maybe I could think of somebody that I'd like to ask to come with me. And I saw this guy that I'd commented on a comment of his or something like that, a song I think that he posted a while ago. And I came across that conversation that we had. And this is another guy that I'd met while I was at Arise, but I hadn't talked to him in nearly 6 years or so, and we weren't typically close or anything. We didn't have a good friendship or anything. We were acquaintances. We were friendly with each other on good terms, but we just normally didn't carry on conversations or hang out or anything. But, I don't know why. I decided that I was going to ask him first. And so before I asked anybody else, I sent him a message. I said, "Hey, Levi, I'm in Brazil. I'm going to be here for another, 5 or so months. Would you mind coming here and spending some time with me and praying?" And he sent me a message. "Oh, hey, Alex, how you doing? Sounds interesting. What exactly are you doing? Are you going with some organization or something like that?" So I said, "Well, let's have a phone call." We ended up having a little conversation. And he basically asked, "Is there a sponsor in an organization?" I said, "Well, no." He said, "Do you have money for the whole thing, or do we have to raise our own?" I said, "Well, we have to raise our own." He asked, "Do you have connections in all the other 12 cities or the 11 cities besides Sao Paulo?" And I basically said, "No, we'd have to figure that out when we get there." So do you have places to speak? Do you have places to stay? Do you have transportation organized for all those places? I basically said no to all of the above. And so he's like, "Oh, okay, well, I'll pray about it. I'll get back into contact with you." And so I think a few days later, he called me back, and he basically said, "Yep, I'm in." And I figured, well, I did some bad advertising there. I basically told him, we've got nothing organized. We don't know anybody. We have no money. We're basically just showing up in each city and praying. And he said, "Yeah." And it was interesting because we had started with roughly, I had about $800, and so did Levi when he came. And through the time that he was with me, without even asking a single soul, we got roughly $8,000 donated. We had all of our tickets purchased for. What happened was that we would go to one city, we'd meet the people, and then they would call the following city and have people meet us. And by the 5th city, we were so used to the fact that every single time we would arrive in a new city, that there would be somebody there waiting for us at either the bus station or the airport saying, "Hey, are you Alex and Levi? We've been waiting for you to come to stay at our house." During the entire time that Levi was there with me in Brazil, we had only stayed one night in a hotel. Every single time we showed up in a city, there would be somebody waiting for us. Not only that, but all of the tickets were purchased for buses, for planes, for all of those kinds of things. People would call us from cities before, say, "Hey, where are you going next? Where are you going next? We want to buy your ticket. Where are you going next? We want to introduce you to a family there that's mission-minded and that would love to have you there. Where are you going next?" And so we ended up basically, just from the first few cities that we went to, already getting connections into all of the other cities. It just opened up. And so we now could see that God was taking us to each of these 12 cities, even though we didn't know how we were going to get there initially. The doors were opening up. People were saying, "Hey, I want to buy your ticket. I want you to make it to this next town or to the next town." And in Salvador, which was after I left Sao Paulo, I went to Salvador. I decided that I was going to go there and then I was going to wait for Levi in Salvador. So we didn't start in São Paulo. We decided to start in Salvador, which is the northeastern portion of Brazil, and that we were going to go up the coast and then come down and then all the way end in the south. So we decided to go Salvador, Recife, Natal, Fortaleza, Manaus, Cuiabá, Brasília, Belo Horizonte, Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, Curitiba, and Porto Alegre. And so we decided that we're going to go this route, kind of just do a little big question mark around Brazil. And we started in Salvador together, and we were walking with a friend of ours around the stadium, and we were thinking, what else could we do besides just praying for stadiums? Besides just praying for cities, we walk around the entire city of Salvador. We had done basically as far as we could walk completely around the perimeter of it and then around the stadium 7 times. And we were thinking, what else can we do? There's got to be more to this praying than just walking and praying. Lord, show us what else can we do? So there were basically 3 things that we decided that we were going to ask God for Him to give us confirmation as to what it is that He wanted us to do, or whether if they were things that He actually intended for us to do. And we obviously had already the first thing where we were going to continue praying, we were going to continue to be present around the cities and around the stadiums and interceding on behalf of the city and the people that we just saw day to day on the streets. But then what we also wanted to know is whether He wanted us to walk into the favelas, whether He wanted us to go into these slums, and whether He wanted us to break down those walls that existed, because more often than not, what we had discovered while being there, just even in the very first town, that there was a general separation between those that lived in the favelas and the rest of the population. And that would become a little bit more clear as we continue to travel and understand the dynamics of the culture. And so the third thing that we wanted to ask was whether God had actually wanted us to talk with prostitutes directly and even train groups of young people to begin ministering in like manner that we had done in Atlanta through kind of a Princess Night-like ministry. And if you guys remember what I'd mentioned in relation to that, it was basically just being on the streets, handing out the cards and the roses, and giving some level of encouragement, showing them that we actually cared about them. And so we kind of wanted to know clearly, and I don't mean ambiguously, I meant clearly, do you want us to do these things? We're not asking, we're going to go forward with it because we believe that you do, but you're going to have to just make sure that you show us that, confirm it for us, basically. And so the following city after we were in Salvador, we arrived in Recife. And in Recife, we stayed with a very lovely family. They took very good care of us. The woman there was kind of like what we called our Brazilian mom, and she was very careful to make sure that we were okay and always doing well, and the family was very nice to us. All the families were, but in this particular place, we had mentioned that we were thinking of going into a favela. And immediately she jumped up and she said, we really don't think it's a good idea that you do this. I mean, we appreciate that you're here and that you're trying to do all of these things. You can continue praying. It's already a bit of a risk just you being on the street as often as you are. You can get robbed and things like that. But the moment that you step into a favela, the chances just go up astronomically. And, I hate to say it, but you guys are ignorant Americans. You don't really know the way things work here. And so just take my word for it. The last thing I would feel absolutely responsible if you got kidnapped, or if you got, robbed, or if you got beat, or even if you got killed. And all of those are possibilities. Even cops at times don't even go into favelas unless they're well armed, and they don't stay for very long. And so she basically told us not to do it. Well, we kind of obeyed for a little while, but as most kids do, they find at some point where mom's not around. And so Levi and I, we were walking down one day with another friend of ours who had a ministry outside of a particular favela. And he had always wanted to get inside this favela because he felt that the church was, once again, not doing very much to reach out to those in the favelas. And we were with him and we were helping out his project. And then one night after we were done with what he was doing, we started walking around, and I basically said, hey, why don't we just walk into this favela right now? And I look at Levi and I say, what do you think about it? And he says, well, that was one of the things we put before God, right? It's one of the things that we needed to find out if God wants us to do it or not. I'm feeling fine with it, let's go. And so we look over at our friend, and he looks rather nervous, and I'm looking at him and I'm saying, well, didn't you always want to be able to get into a favela and see if there's some way that you can minister to them? And he said, well, yeah, but just walking in kind of, with not any plans or whatever, just, hey, I just feel like taking a stroll to a favela when you're a stranger is just not, that's not what we do. And it's nighttime, and you've got a camera, and I'm with 2 Americans. So really we had kind of like, the situation stacked against us. Walking to a favela is bad, walking at night is even worse, and then walking with 2 strangers, Americans who don't even really speak the language very well and are carrying equipment, well, you're basically asking for trouble. But we were convinced that we needed to go, that we were being called to do so, and so we started walking in. We started going into the favela, and kind of like this alleyway that was leading in, there was this guy at the corner, and he immediately saw us trying to approach and walk down this alley that was leading into the favela, and he said, whoa, what are you guys doing here? He immediately recognized that we weren't from that place. And so my friend, he walks up and he's trying to say, well, I've got these, 2 American guys here, and we're here to pray for you, and we wanted to know if there's anything we can do to help you out and stuff like that. And he kind of looks at us and he's like, really? It's like, oh man, we love that. That's amazing. Yeah, come on in. Come on in. Here, let me take you first to the big boss. We're thinking, big boss? We're going to go to like some gang leader or something like that? Or who's the big boss of the favela? And so he takes us to this guy's house, and it happens to be the high priest of Candomblé. Now, Candomblé is kind of like an old African kind of voodoo-like religion. You have this, worship of the saints, and it's a mixture of different things, a bit of Catholicism, a bit of black magic type religion. And we basically were taken to the high priest of Candomblé to receive permission into his territory. And sometimes you maybe at the moment you're not really understanding what's going on or whatnot. There's times where you're in situations and things kind of just go over your head. I just started taking picture of his idols and the little sacrifices of alcohol that he had. And I asked him, hey, can I do that? And he's like, oh yeah, sure, and whatever. He was very friendly. And we basically said, well, can we pray for you? He said, yeah. He said, I'd really like that. And we prayed for him, and afterwards he said, you guys are the first people to walk into my favela and to basically say that you were just here to pray for me and that you were here to basically, ask us what it is that we need to bring in some light. That's what we need. It says most people, they already think they know about us. They avoid us. They don't come here. There's no churches inside this favela. They're all outside, and we don't really get asked to go. It says we're born in the darkness, and that's all that we know. And people assume that that's all that we want. It says, but we just grow up doing what it is that we're taught. It said if we had another option, maybe some of us would choose it. You guys are the first people to come in here and to offer us another option, another way. So I really appreciate that. It says maybe not everybody will respond, but you have free access to my entire favela. You were free to go wherever you want. He sent some other people with us to make sure that we were okay. We started walking his entire territory, praying this entire favela. And later on we discovered how Satan has his territories. Satan has physical places, neighborhoods, entire towns, entire slums that are his, where there's not a single representative. I'm reminded when Satan came before that heavenly council and God asked him, where are you coming from? He says, well, I've come from walking my territory, from walking up and down in it. And God says, well, is that really all of your territory? I'm going to kind of try to deny your claim. So what are you talking about? He says, well, have you considered my servant Job? You can't claim the entire territory is yours if I have a representative in your territory. And so what we were doing, we were entering into enemy territory, and we're basically saying, God, you are welcome here. Satan, this is not your territory anymore. Well, sure, you may have a majority of the people, you may hold sway over a majority of those that live there, but now God has the right to enter. Satan can't say no one has asked you to be here because somebody has. The reason that there's so much darkness in the world is because God has so few representatives that are willing to run into the darkness and say, Lord, there is somebody of their own free will inviting you to be present here, so that Satan can no longer go before God and say, this is my territory. God will say, no, I've got my representative. This is not your territory. And so we wanted to know that God was able to enter into places because he had his people in those places. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to know if God wanted us in that place, because one of the verses that we were using is that whithersoever you set the sole of your foot, that have I given you. The promise that he gave to the children of Israel and to Joshua. And so we had done that when we'd walked around the city. We had done that when we'd walked around the stadiums. But what about the worst places of darkness within the towns? We didn't want to ignore anything. We wanted to set our foot in as many places as possible so that there would be no argument. So that God could say without a shadow of a doubt that he has had his representatives there, and by free will he has been invited into certain places. There are still lots of places that are shut down because God has no representatives there. That's why prayer is so important. That's why presence in prayer is so important. I know that at times we pray for places that are far away, and that's great. But we also need to be in those places to ask God to be present where we are, so that we could be those lighthouses in the darkness. God needs us to physically put our foot in certain territories that Satan claims as his own, so that he can basically challenge the claim of Satan over that place. God needs representatives. We started walking through that favela. We started going up and down in it as if it was ours now, believing that God had now placed us there because he wanted to be there. He had opened the doors to this place. And at some point, the rest of the group kind of separated off. I was kind of following a little bit behind. And I had kind of like an old wonky camera, but we were trying to film the best we can to document what was going on. And I let them walk a little bit forward, and I tried to film. The lighting was really bad. It was nighttime. There wasn't a lot of street lights. It was very dim. I was having trouble focusing, so it took me a little while to dabble with it and trying to get things just right. And they had, by that point, walked a far way off and probably out of shout distance, just about to walk around a corner, and I felt these two guys approaching me. I heard them sneaking up on me. I kind of peeked over my shoulder and I saw them there. And I thought, oh, these guys waited till I was alone so that they can, nick my stuff, grab and run. And I thought, well, that's cool. I got this. Maybe these guys are trained in the streets, but I don't go down easily, and I'm always ready for a little fight. I'll show them what I'm made of. And the moment that I feel like they're about to put their hand on me, the guy who we had met at the entrance of the alleyway, the very first guy who was asking us, what are we doing here? Out of nowhere, he turns around, he puts his hand out, and he yells at the top of his lungs, no, stay away from him, he's with me. And these guys, as if they'd seen a ghost or something, basically run off full speed in opposite direction. Never even got to see what they look like. And I thought, wow, I feel like an idiot. Here, God was opening the doors to this new place, and here one situation comes up, and I think that now I'm going to handle it. As if I even got myself into this situation to begin with. No, God asked me. So if God asks me to be present, then he's going to take care of all the details. If I had done anything in my own strength at that point, I could have destroyed the entire relationship that I had just been building those few hours beforehand. But God saved me from my own mistakes. He said, I opened up this door. I'm going to make sure that you're safe when you walk through it. Stop relying on yourself. I'm trying to teach you something. When we were leaving, that guy and a few others that were walking with us, they started crying and said, please come back. And we walked out of there. We told Mom, completely freaked out. Brings a bit of a smile to my face even now. She said, I can't believe you do that. But at the same time, there was also a feeling of pride. Brazilian mom and Brazilian family, they were right. What you did was right. We were wrong. What you did was right. And we received confirmation. We received confirmation that that's what God wanted us to do. He wanted us to walk into favelas. And throughout the rest of our time, throughout the rest of the 4 months that Levi was there with me, we basically walked into, I would say, a little over 20 different favelas, some of the most dangerous. Rio has some of the most dangerous favelas. But in almost every single city, if not every single city, we went into these favelas, and every single time we were protected. God opened the door, we were protected, and the things that happened could not be planned by any single person. They had to be divine. The following city, we still needed confirmation on project number 3. The following city, we would receive that, but before I jump to that, I'm reminded that still in Recife, we were with another friend of ours, and he knew that we wanted to pray for prostitutes. And so he decided that he was going to start praying for people on the street every single day, just like we were. He said, I'm going to join you guys. He was a very nice guy. And we were driving one time, and he said, hey, Alex, there's a prostitute right there under that bridge. Do you want to stop? Do you want to talk to her? I said, sure, let's do that. So he pulls over the car under the bridge, and he rolls down the window. She kind of cautiously looks, walks from my side. I'm in the passenger seat, walks around back, looks at the license plate, then comes back to his side, says, yeah, well, what do you want? He says, oh, well, I'm here with 2 Americans. She says, oh, 2 Americans. Are they here for a program? He says, no. So we're not here for that. We're here to pray for you. She looks a little incredulously. You're here to pray for me? She's like, yeah. They're missionaries. They're here to pray for you. All of a sudden you see kind of like a mask fall off her face, a sigh of relief. She's a different person. She's gone from being that person on the street that needed to work to make money to the person that now doesn't have to fake that or hold that persona anymore. She can relax and be herself. And she says, wow, praise the Lord. Says, I love Jesus. I've been praying to Jesus every single day that he would get me out of this life. Says, I have 2 children. My husband left me, and I've never been to school, and I don't know how to do anything. So I do the only thing that I can to support my family. Says, I don't want to do this, and God knows I don't want to do this. I hate it. Every single day I hate it. And I've been studying the Bible, and I'm convinced of what I've been studying, and I want to be baptized, but I'm so afraid that if they find out what I do, that they're going to kick me out. They're not going to baptize me. They're not going to let me to join the church. So I pray to God every single day that he would deliver me from this life so that I could get baptized and join the church. He says, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Seventh-day Adventists, but I believe every single thing that they say. And I want to get baptized in the Seventh-day Adventist church. Levi and I were looking at each other, we're looking at her, and we have that proverbial jaw drop, blank face. What? I don't know if you can get a clearer answer than that. The very first prostitute we talk to is looking for us. She's looking to join the church, but she's afraid because she doesn't know if there's people within the church that would actually accept her. And we are looking for someone to find out, to give us confirmation whether God wants us to reach out to prostitutes. And the very first one wants to get baptized before we even talk to her about a single Bible study whatsoever. God had already prepared this person. We did nothing. We showed up. God showed us that He has His people in every single place who fear Him. Even among the worst of the worst, people that we would immediately cast out. We said, well, listen, there are people within the church who are searching for people like you. We are Adventist. We will help you. Our friend, his wife was a social worker, and we got all her contact information, and he said, we live in a town not too far away, I'm going to go talk to my wife, we're going to call each other, I'm going to have you guys talk, and we'll find a way. We'll find you some work, we'll get you to do something, we'll get you out of here. And she was so excited. We prayed with her, and now we knew, okay, I don't know what more confirmation you need. Now we just need a group of people. So fast forward a little bit, we're in the following city in Natal, and it's just during the time where Carnival is about to happen. And Carnival is a celebration that is, the name is Carnival, it's very carnal. There's a lot of things that happen in the street during this celebration that are not for the faint of heart, very vulgar, very debasing. And we figured that, hey, during this time is the darkest time, we need to be there to pray. And the locals that, we went to their house there in Natal, they said, no, that's not really a good idea. We really don't think you should be on the streets during this time. The things that you see are going to be disturbing to you. So our church, they usually just, during this time, we go and have a retreat. And so they said, you're coming with us. And I said, oh, okay, that's fine. So we ended up going to this retreat with them. And they're doing this little presentation, and this guy's speaking English a little bit, and I don't remember what it was. I raised my hand, or I responded in English, and the guy said, well, your English is really good. And I said, well, I would hope so. I'm from the United States. And he said, oh, you're from the United States? Well, what are you doing here? I gave a really short, few seconds synopsis, and he's like, oh, well, if you'd like to present kind of what you're doing afterwards, you can put some chairs around, and there will be some time for you, and whoever's interested can come and listen to what it is that you say. And so I said, oh, okay, well, I appreciate that. And so after he had finished speaking, I put together about 10 chairs. I was being positive. And I figured, okay, maybe we'll have a group of people that come and listen to me speak about what we're dealing with. And ends up being 40 people. And I get excited, and I'm like, oh, wow, all these people want us. Well, now that I have a captive audience, I might as well go ahead and let them know a thing or two. So I ended up doing like 3.5 hours on what was going on with human trafficking in Brazil and all these kinds of things and all these statistics and whatnot. And all of them stayed for it. I probably didn't need to go that long, but I did. And at the end of it, a group of about 12 or so young people come up afterwards, and they say, 3 weeks ago, we were actually all convinced that we needed to do some type of ministry to prostitutes. And we thought maybe we'll sing some songs to them or things like that, but we didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to start. We didn't know what to do. And so we kind of put it off, saying, well, since we're not trained, we really feel like we wouldn't do anything right or how to go about it. We kind of just, put it on the back burner, because honestly, we kind of also didn't really want to do it. We don't necessarily think very highly of them, to be honest with you. But you've come and you've told us a little bit, and now we kind of feel bad again, and we realize that, hey, we really need to do this. And so since you're looking for a group of people to train, here we are. And so I'm looking at Levi, and I'm like, wow, like just thing after thing, like God is setting all of this in place. And so we go back after Carnival, we train them, we buy the roses, we buy 25 roses, we buy 25 cards. And in Atlanta, we'll go with like 15 roses, and we'll come back with half of them after about 2 or 3 hours. They sometimes accept them, they sometimes don't. Sometimes they just, kind of walk away. And so buying 25, I figured we'd buy 25 because there's a lot more. It's a whole lot more visible, and maybe we'll be able to get to more people. In 45 minutes, all of the roses and cards were gone. 5 people asked for Bibles. I don't remember if it was 2 or if it was 3 that asked for Bible studies. But one of the most marked stories was where one of the guys, and it was a man who was dressed like a woman, a transvestite. Once again, a situation that many of us would easily look at and somehow assume, or be disgusted. And we don't know what got that person to that situation. More often than not, it's too dangerous for a lot of women to stay on the streets at night. And men who have absolutely nothing to do, they dress up like women and they end up being in that place on the streets while the women are probably in a club or in a bar where they can be protected because it's dangerous even for them. And so you'll have these men that will go through certain operations and things like that, and they'll dress up like women, and it's a whole situation that's just, he didn't have anything else to do with his life. He didn't know what to do. He had no way to sustain himself. But he had felt that he was treated with such respect by those kids that he says, I don't want you to know my street name, I want you to know what my real name is. And so he looks at these kids that are talking to him and he says, my name is Alexandri. He says, that's my name. And he started crying. And he said, thank you. And when the kids got back, their parents came to they were a little worried at first. Well, what's this going to be all about? I don't know how comfortable we feel about our kids going out and doing this. And this group of kids come back, and one after another, they start breaking down and crying. They say, Mom, Dad, how could we have been so wrong? How could we have been so wrong? We honestly, when we approached them, we wanted to do something for Jesus, but at the same time, we still had our ideas about them. And then when that guy said that we treated him with more respect than anybody has treated him in his life, was willing to tell us his real name, we thought, wow, how despicable we are because we don't really trust, we don't really like him. He thinks that we treated him with respect, but if only he knew what we were thinking inside, he wouldn't have thought the same thing. And here he was opening himself to us, and we weren't being that honest in return. So they called their pastor and they said, this Sabbath we want to share with the church. So they shared with the young people, they shared with the church. Everybody was really moved. And that was the first city that started a permanent program, or semi-permanent program. They wanted to continue to reach out in that same way. In the following city, it was this group that showed up and trained the other people how to do it. They were on fire. And the things that they learned, it changed them forever. It changed their mindset. We went into favelas with them as well. I said, well, it's not just about going and ministering to prostitutes. Let's go into the slums. Let's go deal with people who are addicted to drugs. So we ended up getting that same group together, and one of the next days we took them into a favela. We went into the houses of certain people and we prayed with them. We saw a girl that was struggling with drugs, and one of the girls went and sat down with her and talked to her. This particular town, we took that same group and we went and we prayed at the stadium. They ended up bringing almost their entire church to come pray at the stadium. And when we started praying at the stadium, it was still under construction. It hadn't been open to the public yet. And there was lots of construction equipment and heavy machinery all around the parking lot. And security comes out and says, what are you guys doing here? And they said, well, we're praying. We're dedicating this place to God. We're asking for the safety of the workers. We're asking that God would bless everybody that is going to be here, that they would be safe and that nothing would happen, because we know that during this time lots of accidents happen. There's lots of people with poor intentions and whatnot. And the head of security says, well, would you like to come inside and dedicate the field from inside? And so Levi and I and a friend of ours and a few others, we were led inside and we were walked around the field. And we were the first non-FIFA employees, I imagine, to walk around that field and to dedicate it to God, a stadium dedicated from the inside. We were blessed into going into 2 other stadiums after that as well, one which was not open to the public at the time in Cuiabá, and being able to kind of film inside and just be there and pray while it was still under construction before the first game was even played within those stadiums. And so a lot of things happened that were just absolutely amazing. God was so merciful in the things that he was doing, and the experiences was so marked upon the young people that it really touched their hearts, and it made a big difference in their life. And so now we knew that all 3 of them had to be done. We continued walking, continued praying, dedicating the stadiums. We continued walking to favelas, whether at night or during the day, and we continued looking for young people that we could train. In the next city, Fortaleza, 4th city on the round. This was the city that really was the hardest for us to break. We got there, and we had mentioned to the pastor, who was very kind, he was letting us stay at his house, what it is that we were trying to do. And he said, I really appreciate you guys, and I'm willing to help you out, but we don't really want to do anything in relation to this. Our church is already doing enough projects as it is. We're involved in enough things. We appreciate you guys, but I don't want to let you guys talk about your project to my church. If I can help you, connect you to somebody else who is interested, then I'll see if I can find anybody else who might be interested in what it is you guys are doing. I said, that's fine. That's not a big deal. We weren't upset about it. But we were still hoping that God would open doors for us to minister, because Fortaleza was the worst city out of the 12. It's the 2nd most popular tourist destination for the commercial sexual exploitation of children. And this was the city that you see in the news when you hear the statistics about people being trafficked, people being kidnapped. And we really wanted to do something about it, because we knew that there was a lot of darkness that was hidden there. And once again, we had that atmosphere where there was this resistance. But God always finds a way. And one of the weeks that we were there, it happened, I believe, I don't remember if it was a Monday or a Tuesday, might have been a Monday. This guy walks in, and he basically says, I need a ticket to São Paulo, which is a city far away from Fortaleza. And he says that, I need to go back. Will you give me some money? I don't have any money. I'm kind of, whatever. I need to get back to this town. And the pastor basically says, I'm sorry, we don't give money away. Okay, and that's a whole lot of money to buy you a ticket to go to São Paulo. It's like $200 or something like that. But if you're willing to work, we'll buy the ticket on your behalf. And the guy says, sure, sounds like a deal to me. So the pastor asks him, well, what do you do? He says, well, I'm a painter. He says, okay, all right, I think we could do that. I mean, we weren't going to do it right now, but seeing that you're here and you're in need, let's go ahead and buy some paint. You can paint the entire sanctuary on the inside. The guy says, perfect, I'll paint the entire sanctuary on the inside, and then you guys buy me my ticket, deal. So he starts painting. During that same week, the pastor and the head Bible worker are planning an evangelistic series. They're going to do it in 2 different cities simultaneously, or 2 different parts of the city simultaneously. And so they're going through all their notes, they're presenting to each other back and forth, and all the meantime, this guy's listening while he's painting. He basically gets like the entire, 28 fundamental beliefs / revelation seminar in just like 3 days. And then at the end of like 3 days of listening to them go back and forth and do all of their presentations, he comes to the pastor and he says, I want to get baptized this Sabbath. I've listened to every single thing that you guys were presenting. I want to get baptized this Sabbath. And the pastor's like, whoa, that's awesome. So he comes back and, he's like, oh, hey, Alex, Levi, where were you guys today? Did you guys go out and pray? He's like, yeah, we went out and prayed. Hey, listen, it's a really cool thing. A few days ago, this guy came over and, he told us the whole story of how he wanted a ticket and all that kinds of stuff and how he started painting and how he listened to the sermons. And at 3 days later, he made the decision that he wanted to get baptized this Sabbath. We're like, wow, that's really amazing. Like, that doesn't normally happen. He's like, yeah, I know, right? And, I told him that I had 2 missionaries staying at my house, and so he said that he wanted to talk to you. So I told him that you guys were going to go paint with him tomorrow. And we said, okay, well, we weren't planning on it, but sure, that's not a problem. We can go paint with him. We can hang out with him. And so we started going over there, and we started talking to him and painting with him. His name was Williams. And Williams was a really interesting character. And he basically said, like, I know why you guys are here. And we're like, oh yeah, well the pastor told you that we're missionaries and stuff like that. He says, no. He says, I know why you guys are here. He says, but I can't tell you yet. He says, it's not safe for me yet. I have to wait till I get baptized, then I'll tell you guys something. And we're thinking, okay, sure. And, towards the end of our conversation, we spend the entire day with him. Towards the end of our conversation, he says something like, well, I think that either tomorrow or tonight, one of you guys will have a dream. And at this point, Levi and I are looking at each other like, okay, sure, now he's gone a little too far, all right? What are we going to have a dream about? And, we kind of dismissed it. That night, nobody had a dream. The following day, nobody had a dream. So we were kind of like, well, he's a nice guy, he's a cool guy, but, sometimes people say things. That Sabbath, he got baptized, and he came and he talked to us, and he sat us down, and now it was my turn to sit for three and a half hours. And he was going to give me a rundown of certain things that I needed to know. It was me, Levi, and Andrea, and we sat down and we listened to this guy completely glued to our seats. He said that when he had walked into that church, he was a Satanist. He and his family are all part of the Church of Satan, and of the Masonic Lodge in São Paulo, which is the largest Masonic lodge in the Southern Hemisphere. And he basically said that he was trying at one point to leave, but he had realized it wasn't working, so he was going to start heading back. And then he walked into this church, and he had heard messages, and he had heard Christian messages all of his life. He knew how to argue them in and out and everything. He says the moment that he heard those messages, he realized that there was something in them that he had not heard in other Christian messages. But he also said that at the same time, he felt that the pastor and the Bible worker did not understand them. He says, they say amazing things, but I don't think they get them. However, I feel that you do. And we didn't feel flattered that he said that. We were trying to understand, why would you say that? And he began opening up to us from what he had seen as a Satanist and the things that he was sent to do and asked to do. He had basically said that many people talk about the great controversy in a very theoretical sense, and they have no idea how to engage in it. He says it's spiritual warfare, and they're trying to engage in very physical means. He says what you're doing is you're going into Satan's territory, and you're basically praying and you're asking God to intercede on behalf of people that Satan thinks are his. And when you go and you get these girls or these guys that are caught up in these things and you take them out of there, you're basically taking Satan's property. And he doesn't take lightly to that. He says, I'm not come to scare you. I've only come because I actually care. And I want to tell you that I don't want you to associate with people who are only joining you because they think it's a cool thing to walk into a slum or to walk around the stadium or to do all these kinds of things and wear a t-shirt and say, oh look, I'm a Christian, look at the great things that I've done. It says the very presence of people who are not mindful, who do not have the heart of intercession, their very presence detracts the influence, the holy influence that you carry with you when you go into these places. The protection that your angels have upon you are weakened by people who are walking in there while you're walking praying, they're walking thinking about soccer or something else. It says they're a liability. It's like, don't go into enemy territory with a soldier that's untrained, not even paying attention to what's going on. Gun down, eyes up. When you go into enemy territory, you're going as a soldier. You're going as somebody that's prepared. You're going with a single focus, with a mission to accomplish. Don't bring people who don't have that same mission in mind. There was a lot of other things that he said, but we ended up taking it very seriously. And after the conversation, we said, well, we're going to have to change some things that we do. And so we decided to make a few changes, and we started praying. And I prayed, then Levi prayed, and then Andrea started praying. And while she started praying, I began seeing a tree. And I saw a tree, and its branches spread out to the ends of the horizon. I couldn't see the end of them. Very little light was trickling through the foliage. It was just, just a very small percentage, just enough to make out some basic shapes. It was a very eerie kind of looking thing. And I start hearing these clanging sounds, and I look up, and tied to these branches are chains. These chains are hanging from these branches, and they're wrapped around the necks of mannequins and dolls without faces. And I'm thinking to myself, why in the world would I have a thought like this while we're praying? This makes absolutely no sense. This is rubbish. I want to dismiss this whatsoever, just as quickly as possible. So I try to dismiss the thought. I have no idea why I'm thinking about something like this right now. And I can't. And so I start moving within this whatever thing I'm seeing. And I start grabbing the chains and pulling them down from the tree, and these dolls and these mannequins are hitting the floor, and nothing is happening. I open up my eyes, and I can still see Levi, Andrea, and the tree. And I get to this point where I'm wondering, why won't this go away? And so I basically cry out, God, help me. And all of a sudden I see the base of the tree. I see the trunk at a distance. And I see the silhouette of a man leaning on an axe. And I'm thinking, yes, Lord, give him the power to chop down this tree. And I start praying for that man, and that man picks up the axe, and he starts swinging at the base of the trunk of this tree. And the tree is shuddering, and all these branches are going back and forth, and these chains are clanging, and these dolls are being shaken back and forth violently, and it's unsettling. But I know that this needs to happen, this tree needs to be cut down, or nothing will be resolved. And so I pray, Lord, give him strength. And that tree does not want to give way, but finally it gives way. And the tree falls down, and all its branches, for some reason, I don't know how it made sense, but all the branches end up spreading out around me. But the first thing that I notice is not that the tree is down, but that I can see. And I look up to heaven and I say, praise be to the God of heaven. I thanked him that he brought down that tree. And then I went and I started grabbing the chains and pulling them off, and they disappeared. And the moment that I did that, everything disappeared. And I opened up my eyes again, and Andrea said, amen. As I was considering these things, I basically mentioned them to Andrea and to Levi. And I think we all came to the same conclusion, that just like in Daniel chapter 4, where Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he was basically he was a tree whose branches spread to the ends of the earth, his kingdom spread to the ends of the earth, and he was going to be cut down by reason of his sins. So there was this system whose influence spread to the ends of the earth. And there was not a single place that its influence did not spread. And the chains were basically the chains that it uses to enslave people. And the dolls were the children, and the mannequins were the adults, and the fact that they had no face was the fact that this system does not regard identity or name. People are just an object. And I realized that the moment that I try to bring down this system in my own strength, the moment that I try to free people from slavery, it accomplishes nothing. But the moment that I cry out to the only one who is able, he picks up his axe, and I believe that that man was Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ, as the great intercessor, begins to cleave at the base of the tree, so that that tree, that system of oppression and of slavery, is separated from the roots. And when that tree comes down, we can do our work. It is not our job to go before God. It is our job to cry out to God to go before us, to prepare the way. For him to begin reaching into the hearts of people, to release them from slavery from the in out. That way we can get there, and we can already meet with a soul that is ready, a soul that is prepared. We understood that what God was trying to say was basically that intercessory prayer is the power. you want to accomplish things in this world, you need to learn how to use siege weapons. We need to stop hitting against the systems of this world, against the strongholds of this world with swords. I'm going to clarify what that siege weapon is. I want to clarify a little bit more also about how to engage in spiritual warfare. That's going to be one of our next sessions. But I'd like to end with this story. In that city that they didn't want to let us speak at the church or do anything, at 11 o'clock at night, the last day that we were there, a Sunday night, we were leaving that next day on Monday to another town, to Manaus. At 11 o'clock at night, 2 young people said, we want to do that project, to reach out to the prostitutes and go into the favelas. And so the group from Natal that we had trained, that previous city, came over and trained them because we had gone already to Manaus. And so they trained them, and I get a call about a month later, and it's Hadassah, the girl that said that she wanted to do our project. And Hadassah says, I just got a call yesterday, and I wanted to share it with you. I got a call from a woman who we had met 2 weeks ago when we did the project. We went on the streets, we handed out the roses and the cards. And she took one of our roses and one of our cards, and she talked to us a little bit, and then she left. And just yesterday I get a call from her, and she says, hello, I don't know if you remember me, but you were on the street 2 weeks ago, and you gave me a rose and a card, and you told me that God had a plan for my life. And I wanted to tell you that that was the very first night that I had gone to the streets to prostitute myself. So my husband has left me, and I have no way of taking care of my children. Another situation just like the very first one that we met. And she said that I tried everything else and nothing panned out, and so I decided that I was going to do the last thing that I could in sheer desperation and sell myself. It says that evening, before I had my first client, you stopped me in the middle of the way, and you told me that God had a plan for my life and that He wanted something better for me. It says I held it back. I didn't want to break down in front of you, but the moment that you left the streets, so did I. And I broke down crying, and I realized that God didn't want me to do this. And for 2 weeks, I wondered whether I should call that number you put on the card or not, because I didn't know if you were real or not. And so I decided after 2 weeks, I've mustered up the courage to call you, and so here I am, asking if there's something that you could do for me, if there's some way you can help me. Hadassah said, would you like to clean my house? The woman said, I would love to clean your house. The church members started hearing about it, and they said, oh, send her to clean my house, send her to clean my house. And all of a sudden she started cleaning a bunch of the members' houses, and she made enough money to support her family. The church at first didn't want to do anything because one of the reasons was that there was no support system should we take somebody off the streets. If we should do this ministry and help people off the streets, there would be no support system, there would be no recovery center, there would be nothing. And so why even do it? My argument was that if you don't realize the need, there will never be a recovery center. If you don't have the heart for the people, there will never be some source for them to tap into to help them. But what they showed was that even without a recovery center, did we ever consider that being present in those dark moments of somebody else's life could keep them from entering the darkness? Not just rescue, but prevent. Sometimes we don't take that into account. And so things were beginning to open up to our minds. Spiritual warfare was beginning to unfold, and we were seeing into a world that we rarely see or even consider. Spiritual warfare is real, and God is real. And the things that He wants to do for us, in us, and through us are also real. And the only way that we can ever have real, effectual change in this world at all is if we actually begin to grab onto His hand and ask Him to fight on our behalf. Because without Him, we truly will not accomplish anything at all. In the following sessions, I'm going to talk about the power of intercessory prayer, the reality of spiritual warfare, and the need to realize who we are. Because at the core of this controversy is identity. Who do we belong to? Whose are we? As we close, I want to close with a word of prayer. Father, Lord, I'm very grateful that you call us your children and that you ask us to call you by the name Father. It shows us, O Lord, that you are very near to us, that you want us, O Lord, to have a relationship with you of trust, that as the way that we walked through these cities and pray, that you want us to walk literally with you. Every single place we step, we place, O Lord, the sole of our foot. Every place that we step, that is land, O Lord, that you desire to give us. That is territory, O Lord, that you desire to give us. You desire to give us an inheritance. Inheritance of territory, but also an inheritance of people. Lord, people that you gave your life for. I pray, Lord, that we would not fear the devil. It says that perfect love casts out all fear. Why should we be afraid of him? It says that no device set against you, forecast against you, shall prosper. Why are we afraid? Lord, help us to have the courage to go forward, knowing, O Lord, who our Father is, who our God is, and what you are willing to do on our behalf. It says that your eyes are searching to and fro, searching on behalf of whom you can be strong. I pray, Lord, that we would ask you to be strong on our behalf, and that you would work many wonderful works through us. For you are God. You are able. We praise you, Lord, for hearing us. We thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen.